Welcome to the meeting, Tuesday, December 2nd. Please go ahead and stand for flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'd have given you a heads up, but I had a phone.
City Manager W., would you please establish a quorum or roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Napier,
Or all that?
Councilmember Lewis Musso,
Present.
Councilmember Sawatsky,
Present.
Councilmember Scafani,
Here.
Councilmember Bales. Here. All present and accounted for.
Great, thank you. Can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'm sorry?
I
Okay.
move that we approve the agenda as delivered.
Motion by Scafani, seconded by Bailiff. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously.
Point of order, the public should have been invited to make a comment before.
Okay, just so you're aware, we haven't done that the entire time I've been in this position, so
It's your agenda.
great, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, public comment. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the city council that is relevant to the scope of authority of the city of Blue Lake that is not on the agenda. Would anyone like to speak? Yes, go ahead, Adeline.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm speaking as the chair of the Public Safety Commission, and I'm very proud to be the chair. I'm glad they chose me. We had a good, productive meeting last night. First of all, refrigerator magnets. This is mine. It's really all rough up, and we're all out of them in the city. So we have, this is just a mock-up so you can see. It's going to be this size. But anyway, this is what we're going to have soon. And I want to publicly thank the Wanika Club for donating $100 and the Grange, the Mad River Grange, for donating $100, making it the $200 for 500 of these magnets. They should be coming in about 2 weeks, just in time for Christmas. They're safety magnets. They have, what we really added was the 707, figuring that a lot of times maybe a child or someone might not know to do that 707. We need to do that with it. So that was the big change. And so again, it'll be this size, not this size. Okay. The second thing, and I want to recognize Marty Granger for this, is some of you remember on July 4th, we had a campaign to not have fireworks in town. And we had the quietest 4th of July we've ever had. So we were really proud of Blue Lake. So now we're doing something for New Year's Eve. And basically it's the same plea: bells instead of bangs, chimes instead of fines. Celebrate instead of agitate, harmonize instead of traumatize. The community church bells will ring at 9 p.m. Thank you from the children, veterans, animals, and all gentle folks. So we're ordering about 150 of these to be given out to the winter camp children this winter, and they'll be posted around town. And then we've also ordered a banner, which will be put on the museum lawn, and it will be a large banner like we had for 4th of July. It's $60 for the banner from Paradise K, and we have a really great company here with Paradise K. It's local and it's very reasonable. As I said, $200 for these magnets, $60 for the banner. And it is a good idea to ask the museum curator, Cynthia Bagwell, whenever we post anything on the museum lawn. It is the property of the Blue Lake Museum. So I did call her today and make sure that it was okay to have the banner put there. It'll probably show up after the Winter Wonderland because they have a banner there right now. And just in time for New Year's Eve. So I think that's all I want to say for this evening. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to add a tiny little speck to Adeline's report, and that is we already have the banner. Ted went to Paradise K this morning, already got it. It's paid for, and it's being paid for by 3 of the commissioners on the Safety Commission.
That's right.
Great.
And
Donate.
Any other public comment?
Marty Granger. I don't know if this is the time to talk about this. I just wanted to express some thoughts and feelings about housing in general. And I know the housing is coming up, so should I wait until then?
Go ahead, and if it's too related,
Okay.
I'll stop you.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to just express myself and how I feel, even though I don't know all the practicalities and the details of this housing project. But I do have some thoughts and feelings. So when I think about the property down by the skate park, I just want to cry when I think of that being housing, and I don't know if that's still maybe happening or not. That's how I feel about that. And then I noticed there's some interest in developing across Charlton, one of those little streets, and I think that's a great idea. And then I've wondered about that property that's on the Annie Mary Trail, but it's across from where the horses are in the field. And it's this nice big piece, and every time I walk by there, I think, well, 3 fourplexes could go in there, and maybe 4, I don't know. So that's a thought. And then at the end of Railroad Avenue, where it connects with Blue Lake Boulevard, there's a really nice piece of land, maybe an acre, I don't know. And I know it's county land, but why do cities just have to be responsible and provide this housing? I mean, why can't the county find a contractor and build? I know there's no public, what do you call it, water, sewer, all that kind of stuff, but it's not very far, it's just across the creek. So that's a thought. And then my last thought is, and this is kind of crazy maybe, but on the way to Corbell, at the big curve that turns left, there's this beautiful big flat piece of land there, and I checked, it's 33 acres, and you could put 100 houses there. Again, I know that's county, but actually, no, it's not county, it belongs to the lumber company. So, maybe could be for sale if the county pursued that. 100 houses there could provide like 100 or 150 kids to the school. All those people, maybe 200 people, would support the businesses in Blue Lake. It just seems like such a great idea. I know that I checked the county records, and there's flooding there at some time, but on the records it did not show any flooding, but I don't think that's accurate. I think there is a little bit. But you could build a little levee and put in water and sewer. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Julie Christie, go ahead.
Thank you. Yep, Julie Christie. I really have to apologize to our Zoom conductor tonight. I'm sorry if I lose service and have to log back on. And I'm sorry to everybody with my background noise. I've got lots of baby piglets in the barn tonight. I would like to go back to some of the sentiments that Marty was just saying. HCOG, I was able to speak on that during council reports at the last meeting when we had a report from our liaison. And it goes back to HCD and allocations that are coming from municipalities. They're going to bring it back. And the algorithms that they are using, I feel, aren't very appropriate. And I feel Blue Lake needs to have a voice in the way they did produce their demographic spreads. And so hopefully we can keep updated on when the next meeting is, but I know you, our council, planners, staff, I really want to just put out there again, I think it would be really appropriate that we write in the similarity that the other couple cities did that was at the end of the HCOG packet, for example. All our planners were supposed to be reached out to send a correspondence. I noticed it was only planners that sent it back. So I think we really should focus on that because the way they want to do these allocations is really not realistic, honestly. Getting back to our commission meetings, I did get to watch public safety last night. We've got a really lot of cool stuff going on with the pods. A lot of my neighbors were there. It was great to hear them. I just felt like it was a little inappropriate for the chair to move without guidance from council, collect donations and stuff like that. We really got to keep everything moving in a good, correct order. Like the bike committee that wants to start up right now, I mean, that's great, but they really should become members of RCMBA or set up an MOU with you guys if they're collecting or helping getting any donations. And the other arts and heritage meeting we had prior, their chair actually said that me and Kent hated their logo. And actually, I just want to make a public statement. Me and Kent never ever said we hated anything. And it just kind of hurt my feelings to not be able to defend myself on that one. So I'm just clearing my name there. Okay, guys. And sorry for Zoom, please. I'm sorry if I have to log back in. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for public comment. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, we can do that. And thank you, I thought it was just me.
Any further public comment? All right. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Moving on to item number 5, the consent agenda. There are no items this evening. Moving on to item number 6, public hearing items. Introduce ordinance number 546, an ordinance of the City Council of Blue Lake adopting amendments to Title 17 zoning regulations of the Blue Lake Municipal Code by adding section 1720.070. Gary Reese is here this evening. Would he like to fill us in on this, or should we start with staff over here?
We can go ahead and begin with Gary. I like what you're doing there. We will be asking that council open the public hearing. Well, first you'll hear a presentation from Gary, and then we'll open the public hearing and receive public comment. Following public comment, you will then close the hearing and then ask questions of staff, ultimately with the objective of being able to conduct the first reading of ordinance 546. I do want to note we will make a slight modification so that it reads ordinance 546, not 546-2025. There's been some shifting in some of the numbering, and we want to get it back to the way the city has been doing it traditionally.
Great.
So with that, Gary, are you ready? I think
so.
Emily's got your PowerPoint,
Okay.
and it's all yours.
Excellent. All right, Gary Reese, City Planner. Good evening, council members. So this item's on the agenda tonight because this is the last step the city needs to complete to be in substantial compliance with state housing element law in regards to the city's 6-cycle housing element update, which, as you may remember, covers the period from 2019 to 2027. So I just want to point out having a substantially compliant housing element is something the city has not achieved since 2009. So this is an important accomplishment for Blue Lake and the current city council. The council previously committed to the state that this step would be completed by December 15, but that timeline is proposed to be amended to December 31st through a memorandum of understanding between the city and the State Department of Housing and Community Development, which I'll refer to later as HCD. It's just easier. So the recommended timeline for completing this step by December 31st, as noted, is for the City Council to conduct the first reading of the ordinance required for this action at tonight's meeting, and then conduct the second reading at the regularly scheduled meeting on December 23rd. So there's a lot of information in your staff report about this item, as you may have noticed. There's also a CEQA document available on the city's website. So for the benefit of the council and public, I'd like to give a presentation that summarizes some of the key points about this action. And I printed out the PowerPoint just so folks could have it readily available in case it's hard to see the screen. You all have it, or?
No.
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, I did not make them copies of the PDF. The presentation is now available online as a supplemental item.
If there's not enough, please share them among you. So, first slide we have here is the cover of the adopted housing element update. And for those who aren't aware, that was adopted by the City Council on July 22nd of this year. Next slide. So shortly after it was adopted, we sent it to HCD for review. And they responded that the element meets the statutory requirements of state housing element law, but then they also pointed out that the city would not be found in substantial compliance until the implementation of one of the programs in the element update. And that's program HI 14. Next slide. So here, just outlining the actions required to implement program HI 14. So one, creating and adopting a multifamily combining zone. This is to have a zoning tool that allows multifamily development by right if it meets certain income requirements. So that's the first action needed. The second is applying this to a site in the city that's greater than 1 acre. That would require amendment of the zoning map. So those are the two actions that need to happen. So if you go next slide. So I'd like to dial down on that a little more. Here is a summary of essentially the content requirements of this combining zone. Some of the text is bolded just to highlight certain points that are important. So yeah, it needs to be applied to properties that are 1 acre or larger. It can only be applied to certain properties, or certain zones, I should say. R3, MU, PDR, O. When applied, developments are required to do a density of 16 to 20 units per acre for residential development. Minimum 16, maximum 20. There's also requirements for the percent of square footage that would have to be residential development. No less than 50% if it's a mixed-use development. Also that it cannot be precluded from being 100% residential development under the combining zone. This question was asked of me recently, what design standards or development standards would be applicable when this combining zone is applied. Basically, the standards of the principal zone would apply unless they're superseded by this combining zone, which you're not seeing anything in there about setbacks or building height or ground coverage. So all of that stuff in the principal zone would still apply. And then lastly, I haven't focused on this enough, but development would only be principally permitted if at least 20% of the residential units are affordable to lower income households. So if you've got a totally market rate project, it still would need a planning permit, like a CUP. It would still be subject to CEQA and all of that. It's only if it meets that income requirement, that threshold there, that it would be allowed with just a building permit. So for action 1, that's the content of the combining zone in summary. Next slide. So then next talk about the proposed site to apply the combining zone. So this is the vacant sites inventory map from the adopted element update. And as you can see on the lower part of the city, or the southern portion near the Powers Creek district, you've got 3 larger sites listed as likely developable. Those are the only sites in the site inventory, vacant sites, that possibly could have the multifamily combining zone applied to them. The largest one you see on the west is the site being considered for the Danko project. HCD did not consider that to be a viable site for this action. The site to the east, it's along Hatchery, owned by a private developer. He already has an application in, so that is really not a viable site for applying the combining zone. Next slide. So the site that is, in our discussions with HCD, that they felt would meet state housing law is that site that's outlined in red there. It's APN, I think, is it 025-201-023? It is a city-owned property. 1.4 acres, zoned opportunity. Next slide. So this would show you, and actually could you just go to the next slide, it's a close-up. So yeah, this would show you what's being proposed by this action, or what's being recommended by staff, is to basically apply the combining zone to the western 1 acre of this city-owned property. And so staff is recommending that, not to do it to the whole site, because we're recommending you meet the minimum requirements that HCD is asking you to meet. You could zone the whole thing, the whole 1.4 acres, but we're recommending you do that. The eastern portion of that site, the 0.4 acres, would remain as opportunity zone. And maybe the city wants to make it open space recreation for a parklet. It's a separate subject, but that's something I would recommend. So just in summary, that was the content of the combining zone, the first action you need to take, and then this is the site is proposed to be applied to. Next slide. So both of these actions are defined as a project under the California Environmental Quality Act and are subject to CEQA analysis. And as we discussed for the housing element update, that was a plan level review because that was analyzing the potential impacts of goals, policies, and programs. So that was appropriate for the housing element update. Here we did a project level analysis. And that's analyzing the site-specific impacts of a future development on this site that would receive the combining zone. And the main reason is that potentially development could be allowed with just a building permit if it met those income requirements. That means just building permit, no CEQA. So this is the one shot to do CEQA. We need to do it at this time. Next slide. So as you see in the staff report and the CEQA document, it's the recommended determination is a mitigated negative declaration. And there's mitigation measures for the potential site-specific impacts of future development on this rezoning site. And those are necessary to reduce those impacts to a less than significant level. Next slide. So the mitigation measures fall within 5 categories in the CEQA documents associated with this action. You have biological resources, cultural resources, hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, and utilities and service systems. And so I'll touch just a little bit on what those are specifically. So for biological resources, and it's kind of stated there, but that would be pre-construction surveys for special status plants and wildlife, nesting birds, turtles, various reptiles, amphibians, that kind of thing, as well as special status plants. Under cultural resources, based on consultation with the tribes, they wanted monitoring. So cultural monitoring has been included as a mitigation measure, and that would occur during initial ground disturbance activities. Then we have hazardous materials. Because of the site history and past testing that was done there, it's appropriate before development happens that there be pre-construction characterization of site soils. And then also, as is commonly done on sites like this, implementation of a soil and groundwater management plan during construction, which provides instruction on what would happen if contaminated soils, groundwater, et cetera, were encountered during construction activity. So the next, hydrology and water quality. This one here, I know it just says phase 2 MS4, that may not make sense. That's a regulation that does not apply in Blue Lake, but should. And so we've included it as a mitigation measure. And essentially what that requires is the site design for future development of the site to have stormwater management features that capture and infiltrate stormwater runoff. That's essentially the industry and regulatory standard for reducing impacts of stormwater runoff and offsite flooding. And then lastly, utilities and service systems. As the housing element update discusses, there's needed improvements to the city's wastewater treatment plant. And this mitigation measure requires a future developer to pay their fair share contribution to those improvements. And that's something that would be recommended by staff to do to most projects going forward so that they contribute to those improvements. So those are the mitigation measures, and as outlined in the CEQA document, those are necessary to reduce impacts less than significant of future development on that site. Next slide. Is there a next one?
You can click it here too.
So that concludes my staff report. Of course, available to answer any questions. And just calling attention to the staff recommendation for this item, which Jill went over, and so everybody can see it if you don't have the staff report in front of you. Item 1 was to receive this presentation and the public hearing, questions, and ultimately recommending to conduct the first reading of ordinance number 546 and continue the public hearing to the regular meeting of December 20th. Thanks.
Gary, a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Are we waiting until after the public speaks? and
It's
then-
entirely up to the
Okay.
council.
Do you guys wish to open up to the public first, or would you like to ask a question of Gary while we have him at the podium?
I think that there was a plan to have the public go first, and then we can follow up with our questions with staff.
Sure.
I'll stick with that.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
All right. I'll go ahead. Do we need a motion to open up for public, or can the chair just go ahead and do that?
You simply open it up for, this is a public hearing.
Great, thank you. So I'll go ahead and open up for public comment and hearing at this time. Would anyone like to speak on this item or provide input? Adeline, go ahead.
Adeline Jones. Very happy to see this come to fruition. I'm in favor of the first reading of this ordinance. As you know, I've spoken many times about the need for affordable housing in Blue Lake. The Botawat Community Project has been something that I've been in favor of. And I think that it's something we need to really think about when it comes to what our town needs. And Marty brought up some areas outside of the town, but that's not our purview. That is not our concern. We are a small, less than 1 square mile city that has an obligation to provide affordable housing. And I'd like to see that happen, and it begins with this ordinance and the first reading. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Adeline. Anyone else in the public wish to comment? Provide input? Lynn, go ahead.
Yeah, Lynn Glenn. Looking at this map, it looks like this lot is up against the X zone, which is the trail that goes through Blue Lake. And when the O zoning was happening 2 councils ago, I think, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of time spent by myself and other citizens to talk about the importance of keeping this trail natural as much as possible, and the value of this property to Blue Lake. You know, I think McKinleyville's buying community forests, Art Eureka is getting a community forest. We don't really have a community forest, but we do have the trail. And we have a natural zone that people use a lot and appreciate a lot. And at the beginning of the discussion of the O zone, there was planning to have housing right up against it, and it really was going to be an impact on the nature of the trail and the natural benefits that are offered to all of us. So we went through a long process to make sure that the building would be moved away from the trail as much as possible, that there be a barrier in between building and the trail. And talking to Gary, he was mentioning that I was the person who asked, at least one of the people who asked the question about would all the zoning restrictions that we came up with during this whole process be applied to this new zoning? And it looked like there was one possibility which it would not. There was, maybe Gary can address that. That was the
State density bonus law.
Okay, the state density bonus law. Anyway, I just wanted this council to be aware that there was a long process through the planning commission, through the councils, and we all came to the agreement that the trail was valuable. It's a really valuable part of Blue Lake to a lot of citizens, and I hope you'll take into account that conclusion and as you discuss all of these ins and outs of the new zoning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Julie Christie, go ahead.
I'll do a sound check. Are you guys able to hear me a little better now?
Yep, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn, for your comments. Lynn lives close to that area. She knows a lot about the demographics and quality of life there. And I want to go on some points that I have for this topic. The selection process of it, I felt like was really inadequate. I made this comment last time. I feel like this was a very narrow-minded approach to a site that was already mentioned prior, that all the same problems are arising with this inadequate location for quality of life for people. We do not, as far as I know, have to agree to do a cultural study on it, because that's up to you guys if you want to do that. I don't think it's mandated. Going to our general plan, you're not going to find any supporting material for developing there. They have desired outlying areas for development listed. Flooding is a huge thing, plus the creek setback, restoration, emergency response. We have no transportation down there. Commodities are not accessible and walkable. I mean, look where they've put in little housing developments like on the outskirts of a lot of our cities, and you'll see the quality of life for those people is extremely diminished. I am not joking, you guys. Let's put City Hall down there and build some apartments right there. That is probably the best place to give people quality of life, is right where everybody's sitting tonight. So I do think we can go, and property owners need to be talked to too. These private property owners that actually can facilitate these 1 acre lands, they need to be part of this process and part of an outlying way that the city isn't always getting the burden for these developments. We need to have workshops that we can explain to landowners here so they can build ADUs and develop their properties. We need to start exploring other revenues, because if we keep just piecing out our city property, that's wasteful, and that is just I just can't see that being a long-term solution for us. Thank you.
All right, last call for public comment before we close the input session. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Moving back to council, does council have questions for staff on this item?
I do.
Yes, go ahead.
So Gary, where you listed the items that would be looked at through CEQA, I'm wondering when we say hydrology or water quality, is there anything that we were looking for or looking at that would have looked at the flooding issue? And the reason I'm bringing this up is I had asked you earlier in July, what about the certification of the levee and the safety? And I also, it was recommended that I talk to Hank Siemens of the county, which I did do. And so I'm just wondering why that isn't part of this, if CEQA is looking at that. Would that not be part of what they would look for in this, or?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to flood zones, I mean, it obviously does state what flood zone that the site is in and adjacent sites, which are in the 500-year floodplain, not the 100-year, for example, a special flood hazard area, because they're protected by the levee. And although there may need to be some repairs to the levee, it still functionally protects those lands, and FEMA still has it mapped as 500-year floodplain. So that means people don't have to get flood insurance, aren't subject to the city's floodplain management regulations, such as raising the first floor of the units and things like that. So those things are discussed within these CEQA analysis, but there is not an attempt to do like a cumulative assessment of the entire watershed for Powers Creek and make a determination of how development on this site would impact flooding in general, that type of thing. That's typically beyond the scope of a project like this when doing CEQA analysis. Okay. That's the type of thing you would do when, say, you're doing a general plan EIR and you have the ability and the funding to do that level of analysis. So that's kind of my initial answer. Do you have any follow-up questions?
I do. So for the certification of the levee, it's my understanding and reading through FEMA documentation that if a levee is not certified, then you cannot say that it would provide the necessary protection for the flood. And this has been an ongoing issue for Blue Lake. And the reason I'm bringing it up is it has nothing to do with whether or not I feel that housing is a really important component of the city of Blue Lake. But I would be morally, this would go against everything in me morally, to not say that we are stating as a city of Blue Lake that with an uncertified levy, we can say that it meets those criteria, and FEMA would disagree. And so what we're saying is that FEMA has this on their mapping, but I see in a product that SHN report that was generated that there was a letter from FEMA back in 2011, and FEMA asked the city of Blue Lake where we were in the certification process. Right. There are documentation from the Army Corps of Engineers that our levee does not meet those standards. And FEMA says if they don't meet those standards, then it is up to us as the people who are responsible for that levee to do something about it. And I just feel like this is a very important thing for us to look at, and I wonder how the state of California, they did produce things that said we would be exempt from flooding, but is this something that they are aware of and that the city is willing to ask those questions, those hard questions about that piece of property out there? Because it isn't as if issues haven't happened with that levee. They have 2 times in the history of Blue Lake, and one was very significant. It pretty much wiped out, according to the Blue Lake Advocate, the mill that was out there. And in your same report, there was a question about why is this mill devastated between 1958 and 1964. It's out, it's just wiped out. And then you see the picture of the mill site all functioning whole, and it is right where Powers Creek is. And there was also a breach in that levee in 1962, and one of the Army Corps of Engineers reports states in there that they did a reconnaissance over to look at the breakthrough, and they had to totally re-amend the project proposal they had for 1955 flood because it wasn't tall enough, it wasn't wide enough, and so they fixed it. And it turned around in 62, and that levee had a breach in it. Although it wasn't that big, it made them completely rewrite their plans. And in 1964, they finished it. About 2 months later, the 1964 flood happened and devastated that area. So I just think it's important for us to ask those hard-hitting questions, because to me, to put the most vulnerable people in a place where that could be a problem, to me is a problem. So I just have to say that to me, this needs more consideration. If we're looking at putting a multifamily, I'm happy to provide. I was told by some very wise people on this council that I should have documentation, and I do. And if anybody's interested, but for me, morally and ethically, I have to say something about it.
Yeah, and a lot of these same issues were discussed when they redid the mapping, I think it was 2017. And I didn't see any indication from FEMA or DWR, any agency that's involved in reviewing compliance with the city's floodplain management ordinance, that they were instructing the city to not approve development in areas of 500-year floodplain that were functionally protected by the levee. So the city has operated under that assumption since. The mapping shows, the same as it did before. So I haven't seen any clear instruction from these agencies that the city is not supposed to approve housing in these areas protected by the levee. And that wouldn't just affect this site. I mean, that's broad, that's precedent setting. I mean, if that was the direction the city was going to go, then that would potentially prohibit development in many areas of the city that are protected by the levee. So that's a much bigger discussion, but again, through the update of the mapping in 2017, I don't remember any direction being given to the city that they could not approve development in these areas.
Okay. So that would be a question that, okay, so I'll take your word for it. I don't understand, because they said that they were not changing their stance on some of the regulations. It's like Code 65 that says that if a levy is not certified, it is up to the owner to let them know and update them and keep any pertinent information, and we are the levy owners, us and the county.
Yeah,
So-
and FEMA, DWR, they do community assistance visits where they come around every few years and they review all projects that have been allowed for compliance with the city's floodplain management regulations. And even through those, I've seen no indication where it was like, hey, you allowed this project in the 500-year floodplain. That's not okay because your levee's not certified. So anyway, that's not something I'm particularly an expert on, but did Hank Seaman in any of the discussions say that the city of Blue Lake should not be approving projects in the 500-year floodplain?
I didn't specifically ask that question. One of the things he did say was one of the biggest issues and concerns, if you look at the old maps and even one you provided through the Planning Commission, when the Rousseaus were looking at building an apartment down there, it showed their piece of the land that they were going to build on, and then all the way down that property, it is an old log pond.
Yeah.
And so, there are a whole host of issues with that. But it also just talked about, where that is. And so I would just wonder about that, because they do say that we are responsible for being the ones that come forward to them. And it isn't to say that everything on a FEMA map is correct, because I know First Street does a lot of the, representations for the flood maps now, and they said that there are a lot of errors.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, we've seen some of that as well. And any time there's a project that's like close to the 100 and the 500-year line between those two areas, we typically require flood elevation certificates and, a topographic survey to really determine what the actual topography on the site is relative to the base flood elevation. So that is something that often will happen if it is close to a line between 500 and 100-year floodplain, because there isn't, it's not exact. I mean, FEMA does its best job to draw those areas, but clearly they have, most of the Powers Creek district in the 500-year floodplain, and under the assumption it's protected by the levy.
Okay. And it seems that that would also require that we follow some kind of maintenance schedule, which Hank Seaman said we are not. Yeah, there's not a regular maintenance that would have to be turned in.
Sure.
So,
And that's a much bigger discussion than what the city needs to do to comply with state housing element law. It's something that the city should certainly work on.
I guess it's just having a multi-family combined zone on that piece of property that would be concerning. And do they feel that there's any difference between it being an industrial zone all of this time to now we're talking about building, affordable housing? And would there be any other concerns that they might have based on that? So those are just my questions.
And when you say any other concerns they might have, are you?
I'm just saying,
referring
would
to-
FEMA or would the state, even for the housing, as we're
Yeah.
developing this and saying this is our best site to do this on, would that be taken into consideration that it's not an industrial site anymore, but we're
Right.
looking at it for housing?
Yeah. I mean, obviously that area, as you noted, was previously a part of the log pond, and it was filled, and it was prepared for development to be an industrial park, but that never happened on that particular site. So some of the mitigation measures speak to potential issues that could occur, such as the need to do pre-construction characterization of site soils. That's specifically because of the past industrial use. The implementation of soil groundwater management plan, again, because of the past industrial use. So those are things that were considered and addressed in the CEQA document as it relates to past use of the property and potential issues that could arise for developing it for residential development.
And I would just encourage anyone to go on the FEMA website and just look at what their qualifications for accreditation and certification are for levies. It does not meet the criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Go ahead.
Well, then to your point, Terry, is there a specific question that you would want staff to address directly with FEMA regarding the levy?
Well, I would have questions about the certification and maintenance. What is the inspection? I didn't get any answer when I asked about the inspection protocols, and there is a very long list from FEMA on what that would look like, and from the Army Corps of Engineers.
And if I may, a follow-up to that, more specifically about, are you wanting staff to check with FEMA and clarify that even if it is not certified, that we can still proceed with the multifamily designation, that doesn't conflict with what you were saying? I mean, if we,
That would be my concern, yes, is to ask FEMA
and it seems like we could still move forward with a first reading if council so chooses, and then hopefully get some information back on that. Is that a fairly clear question for staff?
I
That
think
we're
so.
wanting
I
with
think
FEMA
the
and,
question is really, can the city permit, it's any development. It doesn't matter whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, you name it. I mean, if there's concerns about the levy not being protective, that's a big question. So yeah, we can ask if, under the current status, if the city's allowed to permit development down there in areas that are shown and mapped in the 500-year floodplain.
given the condition of the levy,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
Any other questions?
I did have one, to the point about the trail and that natural feel. Do we have the ability, without overly constraining the project, but do we have the ability to specify some level of greenery or green barrier between the multifamily home that would be built and the trail itself?
I mean, there are requirements in the code for a certain amount of landscaping. If it were to meet the income requirements, they just need a building permit.
Okay.
And potentially, planning staff could say through the referral process, we'll get a referral from the building department and say, we'd really like to see you do some landscaping, along the trail. There currently is setback requirements where a structure needs to be, you can't have, I think, parking, storage, or structures within 25 feet of the southern edge of that trail. As Lynn was talking about, some of those development standards were worked out through that multi-year process in developing the opportunity zone. So Yeah, you do have that setback. I'm not sure if it meets the income requirements that the city can dictate how the site is designed per se, but remembering also, it's a city-owned site. So it's
Okay.
not just this regulation
Yeah.
that affects what can be done there. I mean, Ryan, if you want to speak to that, I mean, through a lease or some other arrangement with the city, potentially they could ask for some of those things, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So there are ways that instead of just having trail, building,
Yeah.
ground, that we could try to acknowledge how it's felt in the past.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely.
Any other questions? Michelle?
I would just ask, I mean, I know that this has been going on for a while, but are there alternative sites that should be considered?
There are alternative sites that were considered and discussed with HCD. There's just only so many.
Right.
First, you look at your vacant sites, and I showed that map earlier. I don't know if I have that in front of me.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So you've got those three, thank you. You've got these three here. Those are our vacant sites, and those are our largest vacant sites. And we did discuss those with HCD. The Daco site that's being considered for that, they said, look, this multifamily combining zone is being done to facilitate development in the lower income category. You've already got a project considering the lower income category. Applying it to that site is like double counting, you know, like that, no. You've already said in your site inventory that that site can be lower. And then you have the Boughton site, which is right along Hatchery, the creek runs through it. It's just got limited development potential. It can accommodate some development, but 16 to 20 units per
Right.
acre, probably not. We also asked about this one here. This is a Farley property off of South Railroad. The concern was undersized utilities, poor access, landlocked, you know, how feasible is it that that site will be ready for development within this current planning cycle?
Okay.
So that was a concern on that one. We also, because for years we've been talking about the Calgon Apartment site, so I also brought that up just to have the discussion. We got this site, you know, the building could be demoed, it could be prepped for development, and they're like, is that gonna happen in this planning cycle? I'm like,
Sure.
probably not. And they're like, then we don't see that as a viable site. So that was the dialogue that happened with HCD, where we went over a number of sites. They also noted if it's not currently in the site inventory, you gotta amend your housing element to include it. And when adding that to this process, it was kind of like, I mean, yeah, that site's probably not viable, so why would we bother going through that
Gotcha.
process? So when it came down to it, what we were left with is this what we're recommending?
Right.
Seemed to be the most viable, and I really wanted to run it by HCD, because the last thing I want to do is have the city take action on this, send it to them, like, we don't like that site, that doesn't work. So we met
Right.
with them in advance to get their essentially sign off on, yes, we consider this site to meet the requirements we're asking you to meet. So.
Thank you.
Elise, do you have any questions?
I guess my only thought after the levy conversation is, so we're zoning this as we are, but that doesn't mean that anybody's ever gonna build on it, right? I mean,
Sure.
anybody
You'd have
could
to
come
have a
along and
willing
go,
developer.
I don't
Yeah.
wanna build housing here behind this uncertified levy.
You'd have to have a willing developer, sure. And there's other analysis that potentially would happen. I mean, when you're talking about public health and safety issues, somebody applies for a building permit, FEMA's telling us we can't allow development there. That's problematic, right?
Right.
But you're right, this doesn't guarantee the development will happen. It just lowers the barriers if you're providing 20% or more of the units as affordable to lower income households. Otherwise, you're going through the same CUP and CEQA process that any project would, it's of this size of Blue Lake.
And I know we've had this particular conversation before, when we talk about flooding and how that area can potentially become islanded. And depending on the level of flooding, Hatchery Road is closed, so people can't exit off of Hatchery Road. There is no other exit off of there unless you can cross the river. But in a big flood event, you wouldn't be able to cross the river because the other side of the river will be flooded. So again, we're back to that, you know, yeah, in the summertime and dry season, it looks like it might work, but if we have a very serious flood event at all,
Yeah.
nobody can leave, unless they have a boat. And that could be bad. You know, I'm just still concerned that that's where we're focusing a lot of this housing development. I mean, I
Yeah.
realize we don't have other places to put it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a catastrophic flood that blows a levee out or the dam fails, I mean, so many people in the community of the Mad River
Right.
Valley are gonna be in a rough spot, right?
Right.
The flooding we've seen, you know, in recent years where it has flooded those areas, it's pretty brief how long it floods those areas. You know, it's not like people are stranded for days on end where they can't get out of that area. It rises quickly, it falls quickly.
That's true. If somebody in there has a medical emergency,
Sure.
how are they gonna get out? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, it's still, I've lived on both sides of the river, and there were times I had to, you know, if I had to go to work, I was driving down West End Road, but I couldn't cross back.
yeah, I mean, when there's been catastrophic floods, I mean, they were flying people in and out of places. I mean, you know, they do what they have to do to try and save people. Yeah.
No, my point is just that it doesn't have to be catastrophic. You know, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
the giant, you know, the entire area is inundated and
Mhm.
we've got lots of bigger problems. I'm just saying that, you know, it hasn't happened in recent years, but Hatchery Road flooding on the other side happens.
Yeah.
And it's not so rare. So I think we need to keep that into, you know, in our considerations about that area. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Gary, can the zone be applied to a private area, or is it city-owned property only?
It can be applied to any property
Okay.
that is in 1 acre or greater and in R3, MU, PDR, or O.
Great.
We're only proposing to do it on one site in this current cycle, but this tool could be used in later cycles for a similar purpose.
When you said it, the state bonus housing law wouldn't apply, what was that again? Or what exactly was that?
Yeah, so that came from Lynn Glenn's question. So she asked me, would the development standards, the opportunity zone for building height and things still apply? And yes, they would, except if somebody tried to use state density bonus law. You can get waivers and concessions from development standards. If you do 100% affordable, you can just have an automatic increased building height. So there are ways, if you use state housing law, state density bonus law, to get exceptions from local standards.
And an exception will be applied by the planning commission, or who would allow the exception?
The
Or
applicant would apply for it under state density bonus law, and
Uh-huh.
then there's certain findings prescribed by the state that need to be made, and the only way to say no to that is if the thresholds are fairly high. It's public health and safety, it's things that are severe, and that would be a valid reason for saying no to those waivers or concessions.
Okay.
So, yeah, we obviously can present information on that and show you what the findings are if you would be interested.
So
Yeah, I
what-
mean, are we just gonna show, is there gonna be like a 10-story building there, or like, I mean, what would be like the?
I mean, it's not that crazy,
Yeah.
but it does allow increased height, you know,
Okay.
for sure, yeah. That's one of them, but you can ask for waivers, concessions for setbacks, any development standard, really.
Great. How long would it take to get a response from FEMA? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off
I'm
there.
not sure, but we will definitely try.
Okay. And then so later on, we set the zone for that parcel, and we determine there's a nuclear waste site there, then we could just move the zone somewhere else, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you potentially could remove that zone from that site and work with HCD to find another viable site. But if something like that was determined, where it's like, you know, we didn't realize this until they started developing the site, this is not feasible for this development to happen here. HCD would say, okay, you need to pivot to another one to meet this requirement,
Okay.
yeah.
I had someone say they expressed interest in the site in the past with the city. That's not why the site's been chosen?
No, and that was the Paradise Cave folks.
Okay.
So they had hired a local architect to prepare a conceptual plan under the former city manager. There was talks about them getting under a DDA and trying to work on developing that site. They since then aren't working with that architect anymore. I'm not sure what their interest is in the project. I don't think the DDA ever happened. They didn't submit an application. So I don't know how viable that is for them at this time.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's it? I'll go ahead and go left to right. Go ahead.
I have another question about the density bonus.
Yeah.
What is the percentage of the affordable housing units in there that would allow that density?
It varies. There's tables where it's
Okay.
like if you do 30% affordable, you get one concession, 50%, you get two concessions. You know, you'd have to review the law itself and see specifically what it prescribes, but the more affordable, the greater the percentage of affordable units, the more concessions, waivers, and things like that that you get under state density bonus law.
And
That's the
those
general idea.
Those concessions would be things like building height,
Yeah.
and
Setbacks.
maybe even having setbacks,
Yeah,
having to pay.
parking is common, stuff like that, yeah.
And what about the money that they would have to pay? What is that called? So they have to pay a certain amount of money to help with like sewer or.
The impact fee.
Oh,
The
impact fees, which
So-
the city doesn't have an impact fee program
Okay.
per se, you know. Most communities in Humboldt County don't. That's why we included that one for the improvements of the wastewater plant, because that was our mechanism for enforcement, and to require that was through the CEQA analysis.
Councilmember Napier?
Sorry to belabor the point of site selection. Just curious, could the land that the chip pile is on, can that not be considered at this time?
The foreign power plant site? It would need to be rezoned. There'd be a long process to preparing that site. So similar to Calgon Carbon, except worse. There's a lot of things that would need to happen for that
Enough
site.
said, thank you.
So that site to be viable, so.
Any further questions for staff?
I think so.
All right. So if we don't, then let's go ahead and formally conduct the first reading of ordinance number 546, 2025. In name only, or?
That'd be by motion.
By
Somebody
motion.
has to make a motion.
I make a,
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to have you
motion.
all speak up a little bit. You're all getting quieter again.
I would like to make a motion for the first reading to conduct, for ordinance number 549, amending the Blue Lake Municipal Code, Chapter 13.12, regulating, oh my goodness, I'm reading the wrong one.
I think it's
apologize.
546.
546, wrong page, I apologize.
Thank you.
I withdraw that partial motion. I'd like to make a new motion. That motion would be to read in name only, ordinance number 546, adopting amendments to Title 17, et cetera.
We have a motion? Go ahead.
Yeah, just could you add to your motion that the public hearing would be continued to the council's regular meeting on December 23rd at 6:30?
And I would also like to add to my motion that the public comment would be continued to the regular scheduled council meeting at 6:30 on December 23rd.
We have a motion by Napier,
Second.
second by Scafani. All those in favor, say aye.
Is it
Oh, roll call, yes.
Councilmember Napier,
Aye.
Councilmember Louis Lusso,
Aye.
Councilmember Sawatsky,
Aye.
Councilmember Scafani,
Aye.
Councilmember Bailey,
Nay.
unanimous.
Nay.
Oh, did you say
nay.
nay?
Nay.
I thought I heard yay.
No.
Thank you for the clarification.
It might be possible, oh, may I ask staff a question, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. It would be possible that we would have feedback from FEMA regarding the uncertified levy for that next reading.
I'm proposing to try and get that information by December 16th in time to include that in
Okay.
the revised staff report for the packet, because it's on the 23rd. We will reach out to FEMA, DWR, the county, and any other agency we've ever worked with in regards to the levy and, the floodplain management ordinance.
So you may need to check with the Corps of Engineers.
The office is out of San Francisco.
Yes, it's the San Francisco district.
Thank
There's
you.
no local Eureka.
Great. Moving on to item number 7.
Item number 7.
First reading of ordinance number 549, amending chapter 13.12 of the title 13 of the Blue Lake City Municipal Code regulating cross connections and consent to read by title only. Staff, would you like to? fill us in?
Sure. This may actually be a little familiar to you, and what we're proposing tonight is a little bit of cleanup. There was an unnumbered ordinance that was introduced by first reading, title only, by the City Council at your meeting of June 10th that addressed the cross-connection control program. that draft ordinance, which was approved unanimously at that meeting, proposed to amend Chapter 13.12 of the city's municipal code, which had amended some of the regulations to prevent the contamination of drinking water using those cross-connection control devices so that they could not flow backwards or back siphonage into the public water system. There are some amended changes to the ordinance which are included in the packet, as well as include the inclusion of an assignment of the ordinance number so that it could be codified. And so we are looking to basically reset so that we are going to again repeat the first reading at this meeting, and then we would have a second reading on December 23rd. And then would be able to codify this language into the city's municipal code.
Just to clarify what you said, this amendment or this amendment is basically in name, not by substance, not of substance or content.
That's correct.
Because looking through this, it looks
It's the same as you saw in June.
that
It
it's
was
still
just-
currently published and.
It's not published.
I
is the issue.
found it, but
Okay.
But
This is amending
Right.
Chapter 13.
Exactly,
1213.
so
And
it's gonna
this is
be
going to,
out.
yeah,
This will replace it, and
That's
it's the
correct.
same one, but we didn't have a name
right.
or a number.
And I would just add, the ordinance when it originally came to you was just the proposed chapter. It didn't have the actual findings and recitals, and it wasn't in
Okay.
ordinance form, which is why you now see the first 2 pages. And then what you conducted the first reading on is Exhibit A. And so I think it's important to have those findings and severability clauses and other things to make it look like an ordinance normally would
I
for
see.
the city. And that's why I'm suggesting we do a first reading tonight, just to start over and make it look
Okay.
like
Just
it
clean the whole
otherwise
thing
would.
out.
Okay.
All right, and who's reporting on this?
I'm sorry?
Is there a report? It says receive report from staff. Is that what we just received?
Yeah.
There's no.
I'm
no
sorry,
other-
I'm not hearing you.
There's no other report
No other
besides this?
reports.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to comment on this item? Julie Christie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I started talking without taking my mute off. Okay, thank you for bringing up and updating us with the ordinance. I just have like some like side note concerns with it. Like, I think really having an update on our current status with the treatment plant would be great, because if this is actually an issue that we are already facing or could potentially face, and then we're accepting this ordinance, we really should have kind of a collateral plan right now, or at least know that if we have anything that could be delinquent or causing a potential future issue that would then make us delinquent in our ordinance that we're setting. So just kind of really our council and public works working together, I think is really crucial in light of this ordinance is where I'm getting at. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Last call for public comment before we close the public hearing. Seeing none, let's bring it back to council for consideration and deliberation.
Would you like me to provide a short response?
Sure, please.
Okay, so first, I just want to note that you do have an older cross-connection control ordinance that's already been codified on the books. The state of California had made some required revisions that needed to be completed by December of 2025. As part of that, we needed to update our cross-connection control policy, which was submitted to the state earlier today. In addition, we were required to conduct a survey of property owners who may have springs, wells, pools, anything industrial related, the, brewery, anywhere where you could have the potential for, either a siphon in or a pushing out of potential for cross-contamination of either bacteriological or chemical introductions into the water supply. And using that information, staff will be able to say, okay, so you need to either have a double check valve, you need to have an air gap, you need to have a reduced pressure valve. And so they're going to be going through that, conducting on-site inspections of these different devices, and if they need to be repaired or replaced or upgraded, depending on what the potential threat is. So that's actually in the works right now. And this is all for the protection of the water distribution system. It's not the wastewater system, but the water distribution system, and protecting it from the activities that individual properties owners or property activities could have on the water system. So I hope that helps to clarify.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions for staff?
Are we concerned also, in addition to those, because I was trying to figure out, well, who would be impacted by this? And this looks like a lot of work for staff, a lot of monitoring, a lot of checking, but it's also, an impact to people who it applies to.
Yep.
One of the things I was wondering about is older plumbing, houses that are older. We have a lot of them here, and just curious about, I didn't hear you say that as far as doing a survey of people that may be impacted, or residents or businesses. Would it be like older plumbing greater than?
Not so much an older plumbing issue, so much
Okay.
as it is an alternate water source
Okay.
issue.
Okay,
And, the double check valves are typically placed close to where your meter is going to be. So there's a clear delineation between the city's infrastructure versus the private owner's infrastructure, and making sure that you're protecting that point where there could be that point of contact between the city system
Yes.
and the owners. So if you've got somebody that
Okay.
has their own well, they're going to have, because you can't control what's happening with the internal plumbing
Right.
on that end, which is why you would put a double check or an RP closer to where the meter is going to be.
okay. Thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
Just something that.
I'm having to go back in my brain on some really old stuff too, because back in the early 90s, I worked closely with the city of Arcata in developing their programs there. And they are pretty labor intensive, and you are required, this is simply one of the regulatory requirements that all cities and CSDs providing water are required to do. So when we talk about these are state mandates, and it's not a question of us not doing it. We absolutely are required to
Yeah.
provide this level of service for the protection of health.
Thank you.
And then, to be clear, if you have that alternate water source on your property, even if you aren't using it, it still has to have that.
That is
backup
correct.
device.
You either abandon it, or you have a double check valve or some other form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council?
That answered my questions.
All right, seeing none. Can we get a motion to adopt to conduct the first reading?
So moved.
I think we have to
Motion
read
by
it.
Sorry, do I have to
You have
read
to
it?
make a motion.
I would move that we conduct the first reading of ordinance number 549, amending chapter 13.12 of Title 13 of the Blue Lake Municipal Code regulating cross connections, and consent to read by title only.
We have a motion by Scafani,
Second.
seconded by Louis Lusso. Roll call.
Sorry. I'm waiting on you.
No, it's all good. Councilmember Napier.
Aye.
Louis Lusso.
Aye.
Sawatsky.
Aye.
Scafani.
Aye.
Bailiff.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Oh, this one we didn't set a second reading. Do we not have to have a
This
second?
is-
This is the second reading?
I'm
or
sorry?
It's not a public hearing,
Okay.
Okay.
We don't have to continue it. We'll just bring it back.
Moving on to item number 8. Discuss and approve resolution number 1244, authorizing the city manager to execute memorandum of understanding with California Housing Community Development. City Manager Duffy, would you like to fill us in on this, or Mr. Reed?
Oh, actually, this one, we're going to hear from Ryan.
Okay.
This is something that he's been pretty long involved with as far as the development of a memorandum of agreement with the Housing Community Development in order for us to resolve the housing element number 6. We also will have Gary Reese available if you have any questions. And do we want to pull in? No, we don't. Sorry. Yeah, I was thinking Ethan, actually, but never mind.
Yeah, so before you is an agreement with the Department of Housing and Community Development to resolve the outstanding issue with respect to the city's non-compliance with the 5th and 6th housing elements, and to set in place some milestones with respect to the upcoming 7th cycle housing element. We brought this originally as a placeholder item a month or so ago. And we had a discussion then about the city's request to HCD to make this MOU strictly about this 5th and 6th element and to not include any guarantees or milestones with respect to the 7th. HCD rejected that pretty much out of hand based on the city's historic non-compliance. We are 2 cycles in, and HCD was adamant that they want some type of commitment that the city will timely go through the 7th cycle. And so we had some discussions, both internally and with our outside counsel that was assisting in the negotiations. Our outside counsel had some discussions with HCD's attorneys, and it was essentially a no-go on the removal of the 7th. So what we did and what's presented for you tonight is an MOU that separates out the 5th and 6th and the 7th. And so you'll see in the agreement that the 5th and 6th are taken care of under Section 4, City Obligations, under Sub A. And all that says is that by December 31st, the council will fully implement the housing element, and you took the first step tonight by conducting the first reading on the rezone and the multifamily combining. So December 31st is our deadline. We will bring that ordinance that you just conducted the first reading on back for a second reading on December 23rd. And our obligation is to adopt it by the 31st, even though it won't be effective until 30 days after December 23rd. So that takes care of the 6. We will have complied with our obligations. One of my concerns was that HCD wanted remedies that basically said if the city violated this MOU, whether it was about this rezone or about the 7th cycle, they could retroactively fine us for 5th and 6th cycle fines. And so what this agreement now does is it separates the 5th and 6th. So if we comply with that December 31st, HCD gives us a full release against any fines relating to the 5th and 6th. If we, in the future, violate a milestone with respect to the 7th, their only remedies would be what would otherwise be available to them for the 7th cycle. They could not go back and fine us for the 5th and 6th, and they agreed to that. So again, in Section A, we take care of the 5th and 6th with a full release, with compliance. And in Section B, we have some deadlines to keep the city on track to complete the housing, the 7th cycle housing element by June 2027. And the deadlines are briefly by March 31st of 2026, we will have a consultant in place to assist with the housing element, and an RFP or RFQ will be developed so that we can issue that and go through a recruitment process to hire a housing element consultant. By August 3 of 2026, the city will have to publish an initial 7-cycle housing element on its website for a 30-day review period. Prior to and not later than August 24th, we have to hold a duly noticed public hearing to consider the 7th cycle housing element. By September 18, 2026, we have to submit our initial draft to HCD. Not later than December 2nd of 2026, HCD has to return with its formal findings to the city. And there's some meet and confer obligations if HCD does not find substantial compliance. If they don't find substantial compliance, we have to release a second draft for public review in February of 2027. And not later than February 15th of 2027, the city has to submit its final revised draft housing element to HCD for review. HCD then has until April to return its formal findings on the redraft. And prior to June 1st, 2027, the city has to adopt a compliant housing element. That is the normal timeline. Well, that outer date is the statutory timeline. We would otherwise have to meet that obligation. And this just gives some additional motivation for us to keep the 7th cycle moving along. There are some commitments by HCD to review timely so that we can keep our process moving forward and we have their input. But really, the section I want to highlight is section 6, which is the remedies and penalties for city's failure to meet its obligations. So first of all, we built in an opportunity to cure. So if HCD believes that we haven't complied with one of these milestones with respect to the 7th cycle, they have to send us notice, and we have 30 days to cure the violation. Essentially, it gives us a 30-day buffer. 30 days isn't a long time, but at least we have a little bit of breathing room if we miss a deadline because we can't schedule a meeting or whatever it may be. We have some opportunity. And then you'll see B, which is HCD enforcement remedies for the 6th cycle, which is what I talked about, that if we don't meet that December 31st, then HCD can retroactively issue fines for the 6th cycle noncompliance, but we are on track to meet that December 31st, 2026 or 2025 deadline. Section C is HCD's enforcement remedies for the 7th cycle. And so Section 1 states if after an opportunity to cure, the city fails to timely comply with any of the interim deadlines relating to progress towards adopting the 7th cycle, HCD have the right to issue a notice of violation and or enforce this agreement in an action filed in Humboldt County Superior Court. So essentially, if we miss one of the interim deadlines, other than the outer deadline of June 2027, HCD can go to court and compel us to meet those deadlines. No fines, but they can take us to court. If we don't hit the final deadline of June 2027, then HCD has all their rights and remedies under the housing laws, which is what they'd have anyway, which is the ability to fine us for noncompliance. And so that's really the structure of the agreement. A lot of work's gone into it to massage it to meet the city's needs. HCD is assisting the city in trying to identify grant sources, including the Community Block Development Grant Program. And they've been somewhat lenient in some of these 7th cycle deadlines, including the first. They wanted a consultant in place by early February. We asked for a little bit more time because that'll be a transitionary period for us. And it also gives us some time to issue an RFQ and get beyond the holidays. So my recommendation is that we approve this tonight. And if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Go ahead.
I think this might even be questions for Gary as well, but, and I assume that you've gotten his input, but how does staff feel about these timeline on this? And I guess a couple of questions, like how long do you see this process happening? About how many hours per week might this person work on this? Just in general, your thoughts about the timeline for the
Yeah,
seventh cycle?
Yeah, good question. So, there are firms out there that specialize in doing this and have relationships with HCD because they've been doing it for years. I highly suggest the city put out an RFP to solicit bids from firms like that. I think they will be far more likely to be able to meet these timelines than a firm like ours.
So to follow up on that, it's my intention to put together an RFP that will come before you at your December meeting, along with a revised budget, and be able to solicit that for, I don't know if we'll go for a 30 or 45-day period. That's going to really also allow us to have an independent firm preparing the information, and Gary will be able to then review it for consistency with the city's general plan and our housing elements. And so we'll be able to have a little bit, I think it's going to probably make things more comfortable all around, and in defining some more boundaries on that. I do want to note that in the staff report, it is a little bit of a challenge. We got this clean version today. Gary and I have had some conversations around what the fiscal impact associated with this agreement will be.
Yeah.
We did touch on it a little bit at the last meeting when we did introduce the CDBG grant opportunity that they have flagged for us for that 7th cycle funding. Gary has anticipated that, and when I put this number out here, I want to make it clear, this is a total number, this is not the fiscal year number, of the cost for the 7th housing element to be about $175,000 in totality. So that's going to, spread. The advantage of being able to put out an RFP is we'll be able to solicit and see what some of the projected costs, because that will be one of the criteria that we are asking for. If you're putting together a housing element and it contains all these different deliverables, what are you going to charge the city? So that can go in. It's not a construction bid kind of process where you have to go with the lowest bid. It is actually the most qualified. So you will have all of that information in order to make that determination. You'll be taking a look at who the recommended consultant would be, but you would also have access to the other proposals if you want to do that. There are some costs that will be associated with the 6th element, the 6th housing compliance. Gary and Penelope are starting to develop some of that information. It's not quite ready to be introduced tonight unless you've got something since you and I spoke earlier
I
today.
can just speak generally on it.
Cool.
Thanks for bringing that up. So, you guys are currently working on program HI 14. There's a bunch of other ones. So there's a lot of amendments that are being asked to be done to the zoning code. Many of them are just cleanup type things. But the point is, I'm going through each one of these programs and identifying, this is something city staff can do. We don't need a consultant for this. SHN will need to do these. Here's approximate costs for these things. So there are other costs associated with fully implementing the 6th cycle housing element update. And just for reference, I think it was about probably $100,000 to do the 6th cycle. That doesn't include attorney costs and other things like that. Most of that was grant funded. But it can vary, it can go up to almost $300,000 for larger communities, EIRs, the full boat. If it's a large community with a huge RENA allocation and complex issues and all of that, it can be quite expensive to do a housing element update. So the general cost estimate we developed kind of falls right in the middle. So just so you understand, that's where that came from.
When are we expecting to hear what our RENA allocation is?
So they're currently, I think one of the commenters noted, they're currently in the process of working with HCD. There was an initial methodology submitted by HCOG, and HCD got back and said, we want you to tweak this a little bit. So the initial allocation I saw was 40 units. Now that's in various income categories. I don't have that off the top of my head. When they were looking at adjusting how it was allocated to Blue Lake and to the communities in the county in general, I think it maybe went up to 44 or something like that. So that's in flux right now. I'm not sure that's been finalized, but we have been attending some of those meetings on behalf of the city just to be in the know. And there's been a lot of comments from Arcata, Eureka, Humboldt County. They are the most impacted. They're being hit with huge RENA allocations. For Blue Lake, it's a few units here, a few units there, depending on what methodology they choose. but it will be more than any prior cycle for the city of Blue Lake.
Gary, and also using their new methodology, it
Yeah.
actually targets Blue Lake really high. We scored really high with regards to possibilities.
That is an excellent point. They are looking at high resource areas. They look at Blue Lake as a high resource area. They want, and what that means is it's desirable for many reasons. And they want, the state wants to see these other affordable, housing types occurring in high resource areas. So Blue Lake scores higher in that regard, and Blue Lake's allocation goes up a little more than it would otherwise if they didn't use kind of that resource classification for the methodology.
Go ahead.
Just quickly, what is the high resources? What are the resources that we? What's it? I mean, it isn't jobs.
Yeah.
It's not space.
In a lot of
Grocery
ways,
stores.
what you're seeing is they're asking for single-family, communities are primary single-family in nature to have more multifamily and more affordable. So, and there are a lot of amenities that make Blue Lake a nice place, but there are mapping available from the state that you can look up that shows what areas are considered high resource versus lower resource and that kind of thing, but Blue Lake ranks quite high. And it's one of the reasons that a firm like Danco is interested in doing a project in Blue Lake, because if you rank high resource, that also means there's more funding available to you to do an affordable housing project. So that's another caveat that comes with being high resource.
So is Blue Lake higher than Arcata or Eureka?
Wait,
It depends, in those bigger communities, it's split up. There are some areas in those communities that would be high resource, it's like Lombard Hills or, something like that. But anyway, yes, Blue Lake does rank higher than many parts of these other larger communities, yes.
Seems crazy.
The median household income is quite high in Blue Lake relative to other parts of the county, it is.
go ahead, sorry. Quick, were you done?
I think I am.
I mean, are they aware of our infrastructure issues and all these financial obligations?
Well,
'Cause, I mean, this is
that's the city's job to discuss all of that in the housing element update.
Okay.
I'll give Trinidad as an example. They don't have a wastewater system. There are clear limitations on being able to do high density in that community, so that is factored in. But, when it came to wastewater treatment capacity, they're like, yeah, we get it. Commit to doing those improvements that you've identified within 2 years of adoption of your housing element. So when they know there's planned or identified improvements, they're asking you to act faster on those than you might have otherwise to make sure you have enough capacity infrastructure-wise.
One comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. And this came up at HCOG meeting a month or so back, but it was Natalie Arroyo who had brought up about, just looking at the capacity in Humboldt in general for this, and our limitations on infrastructure and power. So, I don't know at what point we consider ourselves saturated or how much that we can really do. I mean, we're a small town already under a lot of financial strain, which we now have to do a 7th cycle. We have to mop up the 6th cycle, and the chickens have definitely come home to roost from the 5th and the 6th, so now we've got that. I mean, that's just to meet the housing element. It doesn't, and that's a good compliance piece, but, then when we turn around and we look at having to do sewer or water expansion in addition to whatever repairs. Wow, I guess between Ryan and Gary, where is the feedback loop for cities like us to say, we don't just need a $5,000 grant. We're willing to do a lot of this, but we really need the money to do it.
HCD has gotten a lot of that input over the years, and some of it's fallen on deaf ears. Their mandate is to get people to build housing at all costs. This 7th cycle is going to be very, very interesting because these RHNA allocations are assigned to communities throughout the state. Many of them are very concerned about how they're going to achieve compliance. Maybe it comes a point where so many people can't achieve compliance that they need to alter their approach. We'll see.
Okay.
And Gary, do you see any advantage, since we are getting a jump on the 7th cycle, to being able to apply for funding and the possibility of getting it because we are doing it earlier?
They have encouraged the city to apply for the CDBG funding to pay for the 7th cycle. So we're looking at $175,000 for that. There's also the wastewater treatment plant improvements that can be covered by CDBG funding. It's a much bigger lift to get all the information into a CDBG application for a construction project like that. You gotta have a draft bid package together, your design has to be complete, all of that. But we're looking at those costs right now, and we intend to provide that to Jill as to what it would take to put a competitive application together. So we asked them in these negotiations, like, is there any funding? Like, literally has no money. Like, please help us out here. And they recommended CDBG. That's the primary source they're recommending at this time. There may be others, but we'll look into that as much as we can.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So in the past, statements were made that the council was anti-housing. Did that in any way play into your conversations with HCD?
No.
Okay.
No. I would say quite the contrary. At the point that I was able to participate in a couple of the calls, I was anticipating that would be some of the talking points. But when I learned that you hadn't even had a 5th element, and that the notices of non-compliance for the 6th element began many, many years ago, all of a sudden it was like, oh, this has been, Blue Lake has been recalcitrant, period. And it just all came to a head, unfortunately, under your watch as you started asking some questions to come up to speed as a new council. So HCD is taking a much longer view than what has transpired over the last year. They're looking at the entirety of non-compliance with the 5th and as well as the 6th.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, the last time an element was certified was the 3rd cycle. That was in 2004. I was a young planner. We got it done. It was great. I moved away for a few years. In 2009 was the next one that the city adopted, but it never achieved substantial compliance because there was things the city council was unwilling to do at that time. The 5th cycle, we got some funding. We turned it into HCD. We got comments back, and the council said, this is too expensive at this time to respond to all these comments and come into substantial compliance. Then came the 6th cycle. So it has been since 2009, because that's the point at which that 3rd cycle wasn't valid anymore. It's been since 2009 since the city has been in substantial compliance. So this has been happening for a long time, and there are things that prior councils were just unwilling to do. And obviously the state has gotten more strict and severe in penalties and things like that. So we find ourselves here today. But.
Great.
Great.
Sums it up in a nutshell. Yeah. Oh,
Alrighty.
yeah.
Nothing like it.
Nothing else.
Nothing like having it all laid at our feet, right?
I have no other questions, Gary, thank you.
Well, I do have a comment.
Oh, do you-
Just quick comment, and it's not necessarily a question, but just looking at what the state said about this adopted element was kind of substantially the same as what it was in 2023. And having some of this come before the council, before even, I just kind of feel like it should have been done before. And perhaps in the future, or it would be nice if some of these things could come before us to give us more time to think about it. Other than here we are in December, even though we talked about some of this in July, and now we're having to make a decision with all these papers in front of us at one time. And I know it's really hard for me, I'm not pushing it off on you, because there is so much to this, but it would be nice if there was more time.
I really appreciate the work that's gone into this and where
Yes.
we, mapping out the timeline, getting the MOU in place and working with HCD and all of Gary's work up to this point, keeping track of giving us a historical perspective of what we missed out on. So I appreciate all of the work. I understand what you're saying, but I mean, it's like, okay, put it on the calendar, check. So we have something to look forward to.
Well, it seems like this new 7-cycle game plan, there's mapped out really, really nice. So, you know, if we miss an assignment, we're gonna know it.
Yeah.
I suppose that's part of what happened the last few years is things got delayed and.
The sixth cycle started in 2019. The city didn't receive the funding to actually work on it until 2021, and they'd already gotten letters saying, you need to get this done, you need to get this done, and the response was, we don't have the money. So that's why they applied for LEAP. And they did review in 2023. The city didn't have the money to do the CEQA document at that time. So then we got REAP funding, and we were able to do the CEQA document. So there were various steps in the process as to why it was delayed, and it was primarily funding issues.
I see. So yeah, there is kind of a gap, I think it's between at some point in 23 to November of 24, where there weren't any, it didn't come before council or planning commission, I think, during that time. So that was a funding issue.
That was a time where the CEQA document was being prepared, yeah.
Thank you.
Really, I have to, thanks are in order, really specifically to Gary. First, your presentation was efficient and informative, spot on, thank you for that. And then for all of the work clearly that you've done. And Jill for keeping us on track. And Ryan especially for reaching out also to others, attorneys as well, and availing yourself and therefore us of their expertise and putting together something that's probably about the best we could have hoped for.
Yeah.
And it's a good guide, so thank you guys, that's some of the teamwork that we need.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
And just to confirm, Ryan, this is an all-in-one MOU for the 5th and 6th and 7th, or we're going to do the 5th and 6th separately and then the 7th?
Single document that
Single
takes care of all three.
Okay.
So what we're asking council is to approve Resolution 1244, authorizing the city manager to execute the memorandum of understanding with the California Department of Housing and Community Development.
So moved.
We need public comment.
Oh, right. Well, before the motion or after the motion? Before the vote? Sorry.
You can make.
Pull
the
it
motion.
back.
Well, that's fine.
All right, I'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Would anyone like to comment on this item? Anyone on Zoom? Okay. Hearing none.
Looks like Julie.
Oh, Julie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you guys, I'm grabbing you out of my pocket. So I'll just start at the bottom of just my mind here with notes. I do support the resolution to authorize the manager to execute this MOU with our HCD, to complete our housing element. But I really want to go in back to like some regards and concerns. Like the date set of December 23rd, obviously we're going to have to bring that back sooner because that's the day before Christmas, right? So I'd also like to see this fiscal impact reflected in our budget. I don't feel we are a high resource desirable area. All our prior grants were based off the verbiage of being a disadvantaged community. And that is like really hypocritical. Then admitting we're desirable based off funding opportunities is kind of a conniving way to kind of build in an area that's not really providing quality of life for the families that would be coming in, for job opportunities, transportation, and just everything that we need to sustain a healthy community. CBGD funding has primarily been wasted, in my opinion, with little to no accountability. We know many cities are delinquent, and I don't want to be one of them. None of us do. But funds, so when we are delinquent, they're going to come in with not necessarily finding us first. They're going to come in with a builder's remedy, or we're going to lose control of like planning. So that's actually like the biggest risk that I don't want us to have. And I feel like the original delinquency in passing our housing element was basically just not having adequate definitions of what was being changed through planning, through council, through public. Like we really had a delinquency with our planner, like getting that information out, getting it to be absorbed. We really were just kind of being told we needed to pass it. And that really kind of put us in like this backwards wheel, in my opinion. And also not updating our general plan. So not doing that and being consistent with our housing element can also then cause lawsuits. It can cause actually our right to lose our planning rights as well, if somebody really wants to fight that. So I do support the resolution, but I do have those thoughts and concerns with everything I just said. Yep, you guys are doing awesome. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Julie. Last call for public comment. All right, I'm bringing it back to council. Had you made your motion or you hadn't quite finished?
I just said so moved. I didn't read it.
I do have a couple legal questions for Ryan, but I'm not sure if it's like a closed set, because we've had a side conversation about stuff. I don't want to bring it up now in front of everyone if it's a closed session discussion we need to have.
Do you want to talk about it offline after the vote, or do you want, do you want to bring it up now?
You want to do a break?
Can we do a, can we, what can we do? I don't know. It may literally take a minute.
I mean, yeah, if you want to take a 5-minute break, you and I can talk offline.
Sure. All right, I'm going to
So
call
we
a
have,
5 minute.
so we have a motion on the table that has not yet been seconded, so I want to make sure that we keep track of the fact that the motion is still hanging out there.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
Great.
thank you.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we vote.